So good morning, everyone. So I'm the Senior Research Officer for Dementia Platform UK, and today I'm just going to be talking a bit about how we've been establishing our infrastructure and processes to be able to support neuroimaging and AI research for dementia. So just to give a bit of a background, so Deep UK is a trusted research environment, just like the Sale Data Bank, but our data mainly comes from cohort studies. So we have over 60 cohort datasets covering over 3.5 million participants, also some clinical data as well from memory clinics. But this is really rich multimodal data covering neuroimaging, genomics, blood data, lots of questionnaires on diet, lifestyle, and exercise. And so this is really useful, valuable information for developing AI models in. So just over the past year alone, we've had 64 AI project applications. And all of this has really meant that we've had to change and adapt as a trusted research environment to be able to support this very large scale research on neuroimaging and AI data for dementia. Um, so we currently have around 250,000 brain scans, and this is continually growing every year. And with this kind of very large scale data, we've had a lot of challenges that we've had to deal with as a trusted research environment. Of course, we have the storage requirements of this type of data. It's, terabytes worth of data for each data set that we have. And then, of course, you have the computational demands from that as well. Processing a subject can take 24 hours. So you often need HPC resources in place to be able to support that. Of course, then we also have the challenges around anonymization and pre-processing. And so we've been working over the past few years within Deep UK to be able to make sure that when we get new neuroimaging data in, it can go through our processes that we can standardize it, process it, harmonize it, and make it ready for AI research for being able to support this kind of new research within trusted research environments. So one of the first things that we have to do as a trusted research environment is to kind of deface and anonymize those brain scans. And this has challenges in itself. So depending on the types of defacing methods you might use, it can really impact the quality of the scan. So we had to do a lot of evaluations within Deep UK to make sure that we could sufficiently anonymize these brain scans while still maintaining the quality of them for research. Um, as well as that, we use the BIDS format for standardizing our imaging data, and this has been great for imaging because it means that we can plug into a lot of existing workflows and pipelines which have already been developed around the BIDS structure, and is a lot easier for our researchers to kind of work with. As you can imagine, as we get data sets in, they come in lots of different formats and different standards, but by standardizing all of our imaging data to this common format, we can make sure that all of that data is interoperable to be able to support things like AI, which you need to have interoperable standardized data to be able to do a lot of this type of research. And then when it comes to processing that data as well, we did a bit of work evaluating various different processing pipelines, measuring things like the speed of processing, but also the quality of the kind of derived phenotypes that are created from these, and the downstream AI performance as well. And you can really see the kind of effect that the processing pipelines that you use can have on your downstream AI kind of performance. And so it's really important that we get the processing right at the first initial stages to ensure that we can develop, high quality AI models using this new imaging data. So our Oxford team kind of adapted the UK biobank pipeline. There's also two other pipelines that we've been working on integrating into the portal so that we can make these derived phenotypes directly available to the researchers to be able to do their research rather than having to do all of that processing themselves. And then at the end of all that, we make sure to harmonize that data as well. Of course, MRI scans come from lots of different sites and scanners. And so we need to remove that kind of intersite variability that comes from those kind of like non-biological causes. So although in DPK we've done a lot of work around the curation of still translating into real world clinical practice. So, of course, you have things like a lack of generalizability to the real world. So, if you are developing AI models on very specific cohort data sets, then they often don't translate very well into that real world clinical environment. What we often see as well in existing AI dementia research using imaging data is that there's often a lack of validation in independent data. A lot of the models at the moment are developed around the kind of ADNI data sets, which are very easily publicly available. But it's meant that, again, those models aren't really generalizable and can't really be validated in these clinical data sets because they've been tested and trained on very specific cohorts. We also have privacy issues with model release, and of course, as a trusted research environment, this is one of our primary concerns: is how do we release models from our trusted research environment while making sure that the data that is used to train those models still maintains the kind of privacy and that information is protected. And then we also have the lack of differentiation of subtypes. So we have a lot of neuroimaging data around Alzheimer's disease because it's one of the most common forms of dementia, most studied. But when it comes to these other forms of dementia, then we really have a lack of data to be able to support the development of models which are able to accurately differentiate between these different forms of dementia. And so what we've been working on in DPK is kind of harmonizing a real world clinical data set of imaging data and basic clinical data across different sites, including memory clinic sites in the UK, in France, and also working with international partners as well to include their data sets for being able to create these, nicely harmonized data sets that we can use, which represent real world clinical populations for developing robust and generalizable AI models in. And this is something that we're working more on over the next year. So I briefly mentioned as well the kind of concerns that we have with releasing AI models from trusted research environments, and we kind of did a lot of work on this over the past few years. This essentially comes down to various different attacks that can take place within AI models, where you're able to infer information about individuals, or maybe even able to entirely reconstruct data records that were used to train those models. And then, of course, this can lead to re-identification. So, a few years ago, we were funded by Dare UK to set up the AI Risk Evaluation Group to be able to assess how we can safely translate models from TRVs into real world practice while maintaining privacy. And so we had a workshop with the public, and we did that with the Sale consumer panel to really understand what concerns that they have with training AI models on their data and then being used in these real world clinical environments, or even just being released outside of a TRV to be further developed and fine tuned in other environments outside of the original TRV. We also then spoke to researchers about how they felt about implementing privacy preserving techniques into their existing AI research, and a workshop with data owners to see how they felt assessing models and making decisions around the release of those and how we can help to support them make those informed decisions. And ultimately, we put together a kind of a framework for being able to enable this within trusted research environments. And the main recommendations that kind of came out of this was, first of all, researchers don't really know what they're doing in terms of evaluating the privacy and understanding the privacy risks in models and how to mitigate those. So we've been working a lot with various partners on developing training materials to be able to support researchers to understand the risks and mitigations for developing responsible AI. Also to develop and help researchers use tools to implement these kind of privacy preserving techniques into their workflows. From the public perspective, they really feel like there should be public involvement at the decision stage when it comes to assessing whether AI model research should take place within the TRV or not. We need assessment strategies to help data owners make decisions, and we've worked a lot on creating AI risk assessment forms to be able to gather that kind of information to help data owners make those decisions. And finally, as well, having alternative solutions to keep the models within the TRV. So it came up a lot where, why are we releasing these models in the first place? The TRV is built to be able to protect that data. are there other alternative methods that we can use to ensure that the models that we are developing for clinical practice stay protected and private? And so, in terms of sharing those models outside of TRE, we don't need to do this. We can share the models via the trusted research environment and make it accessible and able to be applied for, just like our data sets within the data portal. Federation is also starting to become a big thing as well. Being able to fine-tune models, access wider data sets across other trusted research environments, so that we can validate and fine-tune these models. And also deploying those models as well, exploring how we can use secure methods to host that model via the TRE and be securely queried externally for that real-world kind of prediction. So as part of this, the recommendations was around using Federation to be able to support AI research. And over this next year, we'll be working on how we actually have real world exemplars to demonstrate how we can use Federation with neuroimaging to be able to develop AI models. And so we have Dementia's platform Australia, which also kind of collects cohort studies over in Australia and Asia. And what we're doing here is using two methods which have been kind of developed in Swansea to be able to process those scans and harmonize those. So the first thing that we are doing is using the kind of 5 safe TES, it's now called, to be able to execute our kind of processing pipelines on each respective trusted research environment so that we can create those derived phenotypes. So we're not using the raw scans in the analysis, we're using these derived phenotypes, which we'll then use Teleport for to be able to create this pop-up TRE, where those derived phenotypes will go into that pop-up TRE so that we can harmonize those for the purposes of developing AI models for dementia. And we've also just received funding to do basically the exact same thing with the NHS Nottingham University hospitals. So being able to do this, being able to federate with other trusted research environments in the UK with the NHS or also internationally, really allows us to boost the samples that we need for being able to develop AI models. Um, as I say, differentiating between different subtypes is a real challenge. This is what our kind of data looks like in the data portal at the moment, where we have so much more data around Alzheimer's disease, but hardly any data on these other forms of dementia. So by being able to federate with other trusted research environments, we can help to boost these kind of samples for being able to develop models to be able to do this so that we can get better at differentiating between these different forms of dementia. One of the other things that we're also exploring to help in this is creating synthetic data of these different forms of dementia using these kind of derived phenotypes and stratifying that by disease and being able to simulate disease progression within healthy controls so that we can also increase our samples for developing models which can detect and differentiate between these different types of dementia. And again, we were funded by DARE UK to explore how we do this in a safe and responsible way, how we develop the tools and the governance necessary to be able to support that. And we've been working with regulators, the MHRA and the ICO, to make sure that we can safely develop synthetic data sets for supporting AI research, not just for boosting sample sizes, but also for developing privacy-preserving models, which can be used in clinical practice. So that was just a very quick, brief overview of the work that we've been doing in DPUK in supporting neuroimaging and AI research for creating models for dementia for real-world clinical practice. And yeah, happy to answer any questions.